So in this video, I'll try to summarize a longer video that I've done on this subject, and to give you a sort of snap view of that longer presentation, right? So I'll get much more to the point and give you a summary. The idea, right, is essentially that random selection in politics is an interesting tool that can be used in various ways, right? And one of the innovative ways it could be used is to set up bodies, randomly selected assemblies that would sort of correct, compensate, or address issues that aren't really dealt with properly within our political systems at the moment, right? So in this case, as an example, right, there's if you want like other examples, you can kind of have a peek at that other video. The main idea is that we could possibly use these assemblies to address an issue like the Israel and Palestine conflict, which is kind of raging at the moment, right? And how that could be done, there's a variety of ideas, but I'll kind of present here the main one. Let us imagine that we set up a body that represents Canadians demographically, right? So we have, let's say, 300 ridings, more or less, and we select one person per riding, right? And we therefore constitute a miniature of what Canada is demographically. In other words, these people aren't your elected representatives, which don't really demographically represent the population, right? They're instead, they're rather a sample of the population. And so the legitimacy of such an assembly is very high, right? It's more, in my opinion, than an elected assembly, and thus the usefulness of such assemblies, right? And we give that assembly the mandate to look at what's happening in Israel and Palestine and to take a stand, right? We give it a sort of open mandate on that situation. So it could go from making statements, well, maybe not daily statements, but taking, like, let's say, a midterm position on the situation, right? Not just what's in the news at the moment, but maybe they could come to, suggest how that problem, how the situation could be resolved on the longer term, right? In other words, like maybe develop a peace plan, right? That's workable, and that does represent the values of Canadians and what Canadians do want, right? Okay, so basically that's kind of the idea. The mechanism to finance that assembly is very essential because it determines how independent that assembly will be, right? And since we don't really want it to be a government assembly, we do want it to maybe tell stuff to the government, obviously, but we don't want it to be a government creature, or a creation rather of the government, right? And so to do that, what I'm suggesting here is to crowdfund such an assembly, right? Crowdfunding does have an advantage, which is that assembly will be more independent. It does have a few disadvantages, which is that formally it will have to, it won't have like a formal power that would be given to it by the Canadian government, right? But it will probably be able to influence the policy taken by Canada and set an example for other countries that might follow suit, to make sure that what Canadians really think is represented by their so-called representatives or elected representatives, right? In other words, it can have some influence, right? And I think significant influence. I do explain some of these issues like in a longer manner in that other video. So being crowdfunded, as I say, it would be independent. One of the weaknesses of that mode of financing is that it puts a burden on people that do finance it. So we have to, when we're thinking about this, also think about the cost and think about ways where we can reduce the cost and make it, like, let's say, cost efficient. And so one of the ways we could do that is to set up a online platform where these people could pre-debate or like start the debate, or let's say get through some issues that don't necessarily require all those people to be in a room together, right? Because you can imagine that grouping up 300 people in a single area requires transportation, lodging, although you could perhaps cover that with some help of the local residents if they're kind enough to host those people. But it does require like a lot of cost, essentially, right? And so by having an online platform, you can have a part of the debate can be done online, and then another part could be done in person, right? That the organization within the assembly could be as follow. In this case, I'm kind of like it wasn't very clear in that other presentation, so I want to make it a little bit clearer here. So essentially, there's different ways you could do it, but let's go with this main idea as a starter at least, right? Let's say we'd separate that assembly with of 300 people roughly into 6 parts of 50, right? So you'd have 6 big commissions of some sort within that assembly, and each of these commissions could be given different tasks. So one of the tasks that could be given to like commission number 1 is to organize and select the presidency, like who's going to preside over this assembly, right? And it might be co-presidents, it might be one president, it might be one president and 2 vice presidents. So they'll have to like determine what they want and then come up with a suggestion that will be sent back to the other 300 or the whole assembly in plenary, and then that decision can be adopted or modified, or they can send them back to do their homework and go on like that. Right? Let's suppose that that's not such a complicated issue to resolve, and so it should be pretty straightforward, right? So basically, they would have this 50 people that would suggest something, and the 300 then can adopt it. Commission number 2, right? Now, commission number 1, after finishing its job, would kind of free itself for other work. Commission number 2 could organize what you could perhaps call like the groups and specialists that do want to communicate with this assembly, right? You can imagine a lot of people, organizations would want to have their say, right? There's also people that are perhaps more knowledgeable about different aspects of this question. It's very complex because, like, there's a multiple, there's tons of different, professions that can have something to say, for example, on this issue. And so that assembly will have to organize basically and determine who's going to be able to talk. So they'll kind of like do it as they wish, perhaps pre-scan, people that want to intervene and determine if, these are interesting or not, with a diversity of ideas, obviously, and make those presentations afterwards accessible to the rest of the members of the assembly, right? This is probably one of the most important, actually, commissions, right? Then the other 4 commissions could address different issues that would come up. One of them could perhaps have the function of organizing the whole, or making suggestions, on the organization of the assembly. For example, of the other commissions. So they could be kind of delegating or like making suggestions to delegate, rather, to these other commissions. A presidency and specialists have to be there. They're like obvious issues, but this other commission can be in charge of, basically organizing the agenda of the assembly, right? And then you'd have 3 other commissions or so, right? If you follow this idea in any ways, that could be given these mandates of debating this issue and making their presenting their views afterwards to the general assembly, right? So A large part of this could be at least done online in part, right? There may be a necessity, I believe, I'm pretty sure, to eventually have a in-person meeting. So one of the ways we can save costs here is we can use one of those commissions as a sort of um, well, they would essentially be the ones coming in person, debating, right? After there's been other debates, kind of pulling all those ideas together and, crafting what would be maybe not a final proposal, but something going towards that, and then presenting that to the 300 other assembly members, and and then there can be an interaction there if there's need to go on a little bit, right? The advantage of doing this is that instead of having 300 people fly in Ottawa, for example, you'd have 50 people. You'd have that in-person meeting because it's for important issues, and then you would have a mode of ratifying those decisions. At the end, you could perhaps have a whole meeting of the 300 in Ottawa, but it depends how long this process will last, right? Um, so basically, you can kind of like organize those debates on different levels. So this is a general idea. Obviously, the assembly itself would be in charge of refining these ideas in a sense, right? And so that's kind of like my first take, let's say, on that question there. Now, uh, obviously, there's a question of how long this process could last. The answer is that we don't really know, right? Because it depends on what's happening out there, in a sense, right? And it depends how much funding is coming in, and it depends kind of also how the media react, perhaps what the government says, or how the government views this experiment or this contribution to our national politics. And so we're not really sure. So what we'd have to do is at first set a sort of, let's say, 3 month, 6 month timeline, and after that we could see if we want to extend that assembly, perhaps renew some members with others, right? Or how we'd proceed to go on if we need to go on. But I think it should be open, but with a sort of first take on how long it should last. Let's say 6 months or 3 months, right? And so the end result, well, let's say the impact rather of this assembly could be, in my opinion, it would probably be heard by the politicians, even though they haven't really formally recognized it as a or been behind its creation, right? So it comes from the citizenry, but I'm pretty sure the politicians will be interested to see what Canadians, after debating and knowing more about the subject, obviously kind of want to do, right? And the other citizens in the country will also bear notice. And because it's an innovative project, right? It hasn't been done in that manner before, or at least not on such a subject. I'm pretty sure other nations around the world and other groups like the European Union, for example, would look at this and perhaps want to follow suit. So those are some of the impacts that could come out of this. I'm particularly thinking about our neighbors in the South, in the United States, that could obviously organize something on the very same lines, right? And to address that issue. And I'd like to remind you, obviously, if you don't know, but I'm pretty sure most of you do, that it's been a long, this conflict essentially is kind of permanent, right? Now it's kind of, there's been a flare up, but it's a situation that eventually will have to find a resolution. And I'm pretty sure, well, to be honest, that Israel and Palestine do need some help to actually just debate and find a manner to take appropriate decisions in this situation, because back there it's very polarized, right? So we could kind of play the role of the peacemakers here, and try to debate instead of using other means to try to get to each group's ends, right? In other words, words are a little bit better than weapons. And so that's pretty much it. I'll keep it at that to keep it as short as I can. And if you want a larger view on this proposal, you can refer to the 1 hour and 20-minute presentation. It's kind of like a class, right? So kind of view it as a initiation on these subjects. But I kind of explore in a larger manner in that other presentation. But the gist of it is pretty much, I think, like summarized in this one here. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we can together find a way to get out of that situation there, and perhaps also in other situations in the world that are similar. Right? I'm sure you can guess at least one situation that's perhaps even graver, or like let's say the loss of life has been a lot greater, and if it can work perhaps for Israel and Palestine, maybe it could also work for Ukraine and Russia, and there's also probably other needs that I can't refer to here because I'm not following the international news that much, but there's other conflicts in the world that would also perhaps, let's say, benefit from such a mode of action, right? So thank you for listening, and well, let's keep our prayers up for everybody.